Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's session we are going to perform CRUD operations in Blazor application by using entity framework and DB first approach. In previous session already we discussed how to perform CRUD operations in Blazor application by using entity framework with this scaffolding mechanism. So this is the final output of this session. Here we have provided one nav link where users can click on this employees hyperlink. So employee list will be displayed here, and here we can add the employee. Let me add one employee here. Without adding any information, let me try to save this data. Here we have implemented the client side and server side validations. These two fields are mandatory. Let me enter the data. I can save now. Also here we have implemented the email validation. The email field is not a valid email address. Here we need to provide valid email address here. This time I am providing valid email. Let me save this employee. It's saved now. Let me go back to the list. Here we can see the latest employee which we added now. Let me try to edit this record. Click on edit. Here I can change the employee name and email address. Click on save. Data has been updated now. Let me go back to the list. Here we can see the updated information. So also we have provided the delete feature here. Let me click on this delete. Whenever user clicks on this delete button, we are showing the JavaScript confirmation message, where if you want to cancel this deletion operation, you can cancel this. Let me go back and click on delete button. This time I want to delete this employee David Wilson. Let me click on OK. The employee has been deleted from the back end. So we are going to perform all these operations in today's session. Here I am using Visual Studio 2022. Let me create a new project. Here I will search for Blazor. Select the Blazor web app. Click on next. Here we need to provide the project name. Let me create as Blazor CRUD operations with DB first approach. I'll save it into this directory. This is my solution name. Let it be. Click on next. I'm going to use the latest .NET framework. I have the 8.0. I'm going to use this framework. Let me leave it as server render mode. I'll create the project. This project has been created successfully. Now let me minimize. First we have to create our DB. So here we are going to use the DB first approach. Here already I created one database. This is my DB. I have one table employees. Let me expand this. Here we can see few columns. We have ID with unique identifier, data type, and the first name, last name, and email. So I have these 4 columns. We are going to work on CRUD operations with this table. Here I am going to create one folder to store DB entities. I'll make it as models. Inside these models, I am going to create one class file for database entity. Let me make it as employee. This is my class name. Here I am going to define few properties. So this is going to be GUID, and its column name will be ID. These column names should match with our table. This column name should match with our SQL table. So this is ID. Then I'll copy it from here. And I need another property which is going to be string, and I'll make it as first name. Also this is mandatory field, let me make it as required. Then I need last name, this is also string, I'll make it as last name. This is not mandatory one, let it be like this. And I need another property which is going to be string and email. Email ID also mandatory, let me decorate with required, and also it is email address. So for validation purpose I am adding the data annotations here so that we don't need to validate manually. Now we have to install required packages for entity framework. We are going to use the entity framework. Let me go to the manage NuGet packages, go to the browse, search for entity framework core. Let me install this package, accept this license terms, and also we are going to use the SQL Server. Let me install entity framework core.SQL Server, install it, accept. Let me close all tabs. So now we need to create another folder. I'll make it as del. Here I'll create another class for DB context. I'll make it as my app DB context. This will be inherited from the app DB context. App DB context. We need to add the reference of entity framework here. This is going to be DB context. Let me add entity framework reference here. Add it. Select the DB context, go to the quick actions, generate constructor with options. Here we need to add our DB set of employee model, DB set. I'll name it as employees. This should be our table name, it should match with our SQL table. So it's employees. We have to give the same name. This DB context is going to communicate between our application and the database server. Now we need to add the connection string for this application so that we can communicate with the DB server. Let me go to the app settings.json file. Here I am going to add connection strings. Here we have to provide the connection string name. I can make it as default connection. You can give any meaningful name here. Here we have to provide the server name, then database, user, password, and here we are going to use the HTTPS, so we need to enable the trust server certificate. It should be true. Let me build the application. Here we don't have any errors. Let me go back to the program.cs class. Here we have to register our DB context before the build. Register here, services.add DB context. Here we have to pass our context name. This is my DB context. Pass it here. Here we have to pass the options. are going to use SQL Server here. Options dot use SQL Server. Now we can get the connection string here. Get connection string. Here we have to pass the connection string name. This is my connection string name. Let me close it here. Now our application can communicate with the DB server. Here I'll create another folder to store our interfaces. Let me create one interface here. This is going to be employee interface. Here we have to create all the methods to perform CRUD operations. Let me add one by one. We are going to use the asynchronous methods. Let me make it as async. Here I am going to pass employee. Then I am going to update. Based on GUID. That is, I have to pass employee ID here. Then I have to delete. Here we no need of update async because we are going to handle in a single method. Let me delete this. Then I have to read list of employees here. Let me create list of employees. Also I need to get the employee by ID. So we need to implement all these 4 methods. For that I'll create another class here. I'll create folder first, services. Inside this I'll create class called employee service. This will be inherited from iEmployee interface. Let me implement all the methods here. You can maintain separate layers for interfaces and services since we are working with single page. So here I am making all interfaces services in single project. To implement all these methods, we need database context to communicate with the backend. For that I'll initialize our DB context here. I'll make it as read only. It's my app DB context. I'll make it as context. Let me select this context, go to the quick actions, generate constructor for this. First let us implement to read all the employees from the backend. Let me implement this method context dot employees dot to list async. This is going to be asynchronous method. Here async, we have to return list of employees here. Solution Explorer. Here I'll add one folder. I'll make it as pages. Inside this I'll create one component. It's a razor component. I'll make it as index add. This is going to be employee index. Let me make it as employees. First we will write the code here. Here first I want to get the list of employees. For that, employees, let me add the reference. We'll make it as employees. Here I am initializing the list. When the page is loaded, we need to assign the list of employees to this object. For that, I'll create override method here. It's going to be async method. I'll make it as task on initialized async. So when page is loaded, so this method will be called. So here we have to get the list of employees. I'll store in employees. So here we have to inject our service. We need the service here. Inject employee service. We need to add the namespace. Employee service dot get all. Now we will get the list of employees and we are assigning to this property. Here I need one hyperlink to create new employee. Here I'll add bootstrap classes. Margin top, I'll add 2. Inside this table, I need table header. Here I'll add one table row. Here we can define name, email, and action. After the header, we need body. Here we'll get the list of employees. I'll use the for each, which is available inside these employees. Also we have to check, do we have any data inside this list of employees. If employees not equal to null and employees having any data, then we can call this. Else, so So here we can define something like table row, table data, call span of 3, no records found, employees not found. This message we can display if there is no data inside our table. If we have data, then we can display that. ID. So here we have not defined ID. Let me define ID also. And then in this case it should be 4. Name. Here we need full name. Instead of first name and last name, I have to display the full name. Let me go back to the model. Here I'll define another property. It's a string. It's name. I'll make it as name. We can return the full name. Return. Okay, now we will get the full name here. I can make it as full name. So now this property we need to define here. Full name, then email, next TD. I'll display 2 buttons for edit and delete. Edit. Here we have to pass the employee ID for edit. ID. Then class I can define here. Success. Likewise we need delete. Here also we have to pass the ID for deletion. This is going to be danger. I'll make it as delete. Let me run this page and we'll see whether we are getting output from the index razor component. Let me build this application first. Let me go back here, go to the components, layout, nav menu. Here let me copy this. It's employee. Run the application. Click on employees. So we don't have any page with the employee. It should be index. Let me click this. Index. Let me add page so that routing will be enabled here. Let me make it as employees. Run the application. Click on this. Okay, it should be employees. Okay, here it's working employees. Let me change here nav bar. It should be employees. So here we are facing one error. Okay, this service is not registered. Let me go to the program.cs. Here we need to register our employee service. Add transient. Here employee service interface, and I need to pass the employee service here. Let us run our application now. Click on employees. Still it says index, there is no register server. Let us go to the index page. Here instead of employee service, I'll call employee service, employee interface, not service, interface. Let us run our application. Okay, it's not connecting to our SQL Server because we have not configured any server details. This is my SQL Server. Let me connect. I have to pass the server name, then database. This is my DB name. User, I'll use my SQL Server authentication, and password I'll provide. It should work now. Let us run our application. So our UI is working as we expected, so we don't have any issues. Since we don't have any employees, we are showing this default message, employee is not found. We need to do few alignments in the UI here. After this button, it should have some space between table and this button. Let me go back to the UI. I'll add margin top 2. Let me run now. Reload the application. Here this is perfect now. Now we are able to see this. Let me go to the database and I'll add one record, whether it displays correctly or not. Let me go to this table, edit. I need GUID here. I'll generate random GUID here. Let me add this. Let me reload our page. So it is displaying correctly as we expected. Next session we are going to implement this add employee functionality. That's it for today. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.